So now we're going to look at the most commonly used but less known part of business storytelling, and that is the short form story. So, what is a short form story? Well, maybe you're more familiar with the long form story, which is more of the journey, the heroic narrative. And we will look at some of those long form stories in this course. But the short form story is less known. But actually, I believe it's equally, if not more, powerful. So, what is a short form story? Let's have a look. When Steve Jobs launched the iPod to the world, he didn't describe it as an MP3 player. He described it as a tool for the heart. A tool for the heart. And this is this is a short form story in the sense that a tool for the heart is a story. What do I mean? It's an analogy. An analogy effectively takes something unknown and connects it to the known. And that is what stories do in a nutshell. Take the unknown future and connect it to the known past. If you were to look in the human brain, and I talk about this in the Human Communication Playbook, there is a neuropsychologist called Tulving who studied the impact of brain damage on people's understanding of past and future and memory. And what he found was that he had patients, one patient called NN for short, who had brain damage. And this patient could remember and draw from memory a picture of the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building, reasonably accurate as anybody else would. But if you then asked him what he was going to do tomorrow, he didn't know. He had no idea. He couldn't conceive it. And when asked, he said, when he was trying to describe this feeling, he said, like, it's like being in a room and you're looking for a chair, but it's not there. That's how he was trying to describe his memories. And neuropsychologists have found that in the brain, there is no distinction between past and future. Your brain, my brain, doesn't know the difference between past and future. All we know in our brains is the experience. There's either future experience or past experience. It's all the same. It's either experience we've had that's in my brain or experience that I can feel from somebody else, empathize with, somebody else's story. And what story does effectively is take past experience and connect it with future unknowns. I'm scared of the future. We're all scared of the future. It's natural. We're scared of the unknown, right? That's why storytelling is a powerful leadership tool, because what it does is it connects that future unknown with what you already know. And the most powerful way of doing that is analogy, short form story. It's taking the unknown and connect it to the known. It's taking a product you don't know what it is and connecting it to something you're very familiar with. So I'm very familiar with the heart, emotion, and music. I understand to me that's given, right? I understand music and the music I've loved as a kid and growing up, the soundtrack of my teens, growing up with like punk music and alternative music and then electronic music. That was all, I get that. That's me, that's my identity, my story, and yours is different. Your story is very different and it can never be the same as mine. But you get it. When somebody says the heart, you understand the connection between music and the heart. And then when somebody stands up and gives you something you don't know, what he's doing is connecting it to something you know very well through a short form story, an analogy. We're the X of Y. and you understand why, but I'm giving you a new X to understand it through. When they first introduced traffic lights in the mid 19th century, when traffic actually became a problem, late 19th century, must be like 1870, I guess, in London. So you've got this problem now. You've got to imagine it's not like if you look out in the roads now, it's very ordered and you've got like lines and you've got margins and you've got filtering and you've got a system and you've got lights and you've got signs. None of that existed. In fact, when people started driving, there wasn't even this idea of driving on the left or driving on the right. And that whole sort of left-right driving issue, in some countries, like they changed, and it changed and there was chaos. People didn't know, should we drive on the left or should we drive on the right? There was no system, right? Somebody had to create one. And one of the first things they needed was traffic lights. You needed to stop people. Obviously, you couldn't just have, with the increasing number of cars, you had this problem, not just for pedestrians, but for the drivers, right? And you look at the death rate for traffic accidents in the first 50 years of automobiles, it's horrific. You think it's dangerous out there now. Like the death rate back then, they were like cars just running into pedestrians and crowds and crashing into horses and shops all over the place. That was the craziness of what it was back in the early days of driving. So obviously they needed a traffic light system. And, what you need when you introduce a new idea is you need to make it something we already know. You can't have a traffic light system where you have to interpret what it is every time you see it. Like there can't be a negotiation mentally with this thing, because then it becomes an unknown. Like, what is that? What's it trying to say? I don't know. And especially in, a situation where you've got two cars coming towards each other, you've got to have like a quick decision. So when they introduced traffic lights, they used the short form story. They used an analogy we already knew. We already knew trains. We already knew the train signaling system. And the train signaling system was the basis of the first traffic light system, because people were familiar with it. People had been in train tracks. People understood this idea of, dangerous vehicles moving at high speed and that needed to stop. And they had this system, red, amber, green. They understood that. And therefore, it was easy for them to implement that on the roads. It wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't like, what does red mean? And why is this middle thing? Like, why isn't it just red and green? Why does it have this sort of thing in the middle? What does that mean? Because by the time you've worked that out, bang, there's a crash, right? Now, put this into context of Steve Jobs' storytelling, is that he's used the same process. He said, look, I didn't talk about an MP3 player. And a great example, case in point, is Microsoft Zune. Now, Microsoft Zune, you remember that? No, because that was Microsoft's iPod killer. They actually used the word iPod killer, and you can Google it. There's news stories out there from the early 2000s, like, I don't know, like within a year of iPod launching, and it says Microsoft's iPod killer, the Zune. But that was the problem. Steve Jobs was using a short form story. He was saying, this is a tool for the heart. I understood the need for that, right? I understood what it meant to me in my life. And that was powerful and emotional. But an iPod killer, I don't need to kill iPods in my life, right? I don't have that problem. So that was an extremely bad short form story to use. And the point is that you can choose your short form story and you can be selective about it and then change the reality of how people perceive you. You can stand up and say that this is an MP3 player, but do I have an MP3 player problem? Or you can stand up and say this is a tool for the heart to help you connect with other people and to share experience. I have that problem. We all do, right? And I see this everywhere in business, and you see it too. Everybody is selling products. Everybody is selling stuff, but they're not helping us understand where it fits into my knowledge, because all they're doing is presenting unknowns, and nobody likes unknowns. And I don't want to have a negotiation with an unknown. I want you to tell me what this is. So this could be you as an insurance company. This could be you as a SaaS company. And this could be you as a startup, right? Startups are probably the hardest because they're so obsessed about technology. They don't understand that investors, customers, partners don't get it. They don't get it. It's an unknown. Like, okay, I understand you spent every single waking hour on this thing for the last 2 years and you're obsessed about it and you understand what it does. And you talk about this all the time in your team meetings and you get it, but I don't. And you're trying to communicate with this to me and I don't get it. There's a psychological experiment. The name escapes me and you can go and check it out. I'm sure you can Google it. It's called the tapping experiment. And what they did was they asked students to tap out songs. So they had the tappers and the listeners, right? And the tappers each would take a turn and they would tap out a song like this. They couldn't sing the song. They couldn't say what it was. They just had to tap it. And it could be like Happy Birthday. Everybody knows Happy Birthday. And then they asked the tappers, like, did you think that the listener got that song? And then the percentage by which tappers were confident that the listener understood the song was around about 90%. So 90% of tappers thought that the listeners would get the song because it's easy. It's in their head. They're tapping out. Da, 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 da. It's in their head, right? So when they're tapping it, it's easy. Yet the listeners on their side only got the song 12% of the time. So there's this huge disconnect between tappers and listeners, between product managers and customers, between startup CEOs and investors. They're trying to tap out a song in their head and they're just kind of like, I don't get it. And that's why a short form story is effectively the equivalent of saying to somebody, all right, I'm going to tap out Happy Birthday to you. You're like, oh yeah, I get it. Because you've already given it a story. You've already put it into their consciousness. I understand it. And therefore, when you're delivering the data, I get it. Now it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, now I get it. And there's a lot of psychological experiments done about this, short form stories effectively. And a great example of this is like, have you ever met somebody and they're talking and they're like, they got this really weird accent. It's like, I can't place it. What is it? Is it like, is it Western country accent or are they sort of a mix? Are they sort of like, did they grow up in America? I can't sort of get it. Are they sort of French with accent? I'm not sure. Somebody has that strange accent. And then, so they say to you, oh, yeah, I'm from Ireland. And it's like, oh, okay, yeah, now I get it. And then they sound Irish, right? Suddenly, that to you, their accent's changed. And now I get it. It's the same thing because basically what they have done by telling you that they're Irish, now everything falls into place. I get it. Now the song that you tapped out has a name. Now that the product you're trying to sell has familiarity in my past experience. And when communicating your product, your startup, it's the same. I recently was hosting a startup conference for agriculture and food, AgTech, and there was a startup from India who had this really interesting platform which they're building for Indian farmers. Now, all Indian farmers have mobile phones. They might not have laptops at home, but they all have mobile phones. And he said, it was a little bit complicated, the platform, but he said, it's like Facebook for farmers. And I thought, wow, that's genius. That's like a great short form story because it may not be 100% accurate, but the price of having to explain to everybody what it does, why it does, how it does, those long conversations are like, I don't get it. The price is much, much higher than the cost of a little bit of inaccuracy. So to get that into the context of an investor or a client or a partner's head is extremely powerful. Because if I asked you, what is a Facebook for farmers, you could probably guess what it is, right? You could probably guess it. Okay, I understand it probably connects farmers, it exchange information. Maybe there's a bit of a social network there. They can message each other. Maybe they can share prices, jobs, market conditions, all those kind of things. And you're already imagining what this could be based on your understanding of the short form story, which eliminates a lot of resistance. Because if you can also communicate the short form story that it's like Facebook, you can also seed in their heads the potential of what it could be. I understand Facebook's pretty big, right? And therefore, I understand it's sort of grown from like 2 people to like 2 billion. So what's the potential here? And short form stories are extremely powerful. I'm not giving you the full long form hero myth about Facebook for farmers. It's just one sentence. It's just tool for the heart, Facebook for farmers. And these are very underused tools in business storytelling. If I said to you, it's like Airbnb for pets, you could probably guess what it is, right? This thing probably exists. I don't know. I made it up. It's Airbnb for pets. I can imagine what it is. I can get it, and I can imagine that it would be popular because I understand people love pets, and I understand that people have the spaces in their houses, right? And I understand there are probably lots of crazy pet lovers out there who would love to have cats and dogs and alligators and whatever going on in their house and looking after these people for some time, right? So I'm already imagining what Airbnb for pets could be, right? And all you've said was one line, and I get it. And either I think, no, I'm not interested because I'm not interested in platforms. I'm not interested in pets. I don't like animals. I've got allergies. Whatever it is, you can come up with your reasons. But you also may get people saying, yeah, I love it. I love the idea of Airbnb. I want to get involved in platforms because I can understand the scale, or I want to get involved in animals because I love animals. So what that effectively does, the short form story it's an extreme time saver for you. Because what you do is you immediately polarize your audience. You say, those that get it, those that don't. In the past, it's just lots of, yeah, maybe. Now you've got people like, yes, this is what I'm looking for. Sounds great. Tell me more. Then you can indulge your conversation with that person because they're the right person. They're energy givers, not energy takers. And then the energy takers are like, no, I'm out. They save you time. They're gone. They're not there wasting time or criticizing you or asking questions and taking you down the garden path until, no, sorry, it's not what I didn't understand it. Because what they want to do is they want to understand it. And so they'll keep asking you questions and questions and questions about it until they get to the point, that's not what I thought it was. Right? And that could be a customer. I mean, how many customers have wasted your salespeople's time because they didn't understand what the product was? They didn't want to look stupid and say no. People are fearful of missing out. They'll waste their time happily asking your salesperson for more information until it's like, no, it's not what I want. What you want is that person to say, no, it's not what I want straight away. Because then your salesperson can focus on the guy who's saying, yeah, I love it. That's where you need to be right now. So short form stories are effective in getting to the point straight away. They might not always be accurate, but that sort of small trade-off in accuracy is worth it in terms of aligning those conversations earlier on. And look, for example, if I said to you Uber for doctors, this is a real product. And actually, if you Google Uber for doctors, there's a lot of these, right? It's not the official Uber. But you can imagine that how much time that saves. If I said Uber for doctors, what is it? You could probably guess that it probably employs a lot of the strategies that Uber employs for underutilized fixed assets within business, like redundant resources. And those could be doctors, and it could be cars, it could be like Airbnb, like back rooms in the house, right? So Uber could do the same for doctors. It may work. It's assuming, obviously, you would look at this model and you would say, okay, well, the Airbnb and Uber model works on redundancy of assets. You can't just sell off the back room of your house and, I drive the car mostly with 3 empty seats, and 95% of the time my car doesn't drive. It's on the driveway, right? So there's a lot of redundancy of assets in the system. And that's how that model works. I understand that model, and therefore, if you can create a way of unlocking redundant assets in the system, then you can create this massive scale. These underutilized fixed assets, that it could be like space in the house, which is like obviously the original the original Airbnb model, or Uber is like, people just had these cars which weren't earning money. And that's the sort of the physics of the model, if you like. And if you buy into that physics, you also then look at this and say, does that also apply here? Now, what you're saying with Uber for Doctors as a short form story is you're assuming that the physics of Uber apply to doctors. So you're assuming that doctors must be redundant most of the time. That they must be operating a large amount of ineffective time. Now, interestingly, in healthcare, this is partially true because doctors spend more than 60% of their time on paperwork. But it's doctors doing the paperwork. They still have to do it. And in fact, doctors work crazy hours, especially if they're training. And the question now is like you may buy into the short form idea, but does it work here? This may work. I don't know the model. As I said, this is one of many on the internet. But my question would be is that, do doctors really have a lot of underutilized capacity in the system? I would question that, because I think it's probably the opposite. I think that doctors probably have extreme overutilization of assets, that they're working 100+ hours a week. So to sort of create this extra system that even helps them use up redundant hours ain't going to work. What the main problem for doctors is paperwork, not sitting around doing nothing. By contrast, this may be much more effective with lawyers. And, lawyers are not, especially the more valuable become, the less utilized your time becomes, right? And you look at, there are great platforms like Asia Law Network, which are effectively like an Uber for doctors, which effectively uses the same short form story, which is we're going to unlock the unproductive assets in the model, the underutilized fixed assets, and then monetize them without much cost. You can go into Asia Law Network and sell your time as a lawyer for 15 minutes, 20 minutes for good money. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't sell the car or sell the house. You still own the car and still own the house. You still own the law firm and your brand. You don't lose all of that. But that's the beauty of that short form story. It still applies the same physics for Uber as it does to lawyers, right? But this I'm not sure about. This would be interesting to analyze a bit further. So, the point of the short form story is it's an extremely powerful way of saving time and communicating with people. And choose them wisely. Find one that works and make sure that the physics of the short form story that you're inheriting works for you. The traffic lights works, right? It wasn't like, okay, well, actually, we need like a red, amber, green, and then blue, and the blue would be reverse. That's kind of like, well, the physics are a little bit different here from trains to cars, right? So it wouldn't work. But as it stands, it's very much the same system. And therefore that works. The Facebook for Farmers works, even though it may not be highly accurate. The Airbnb for pets works if it's the same model of creating this platform that can release redundant assets in the system. And Uber for doctors may work if that is exactly what they're doing. And Uber for lawyers certainly works. So I would experiment. I think what you need to do with short form stories, and this is what I call agile storytelling, you need to experiment. You need to choose short form stories and then test them, throw them out there, see what sticks, see what comes back. If you say, we're like the Uber for insurance, see how people respond to that. you're doing it with people around you. You might test it with your salespeople. You might test it with your product people. What is the reaction that you get? Or you might say, we're like Airbnb for insurance, or we're like the iPod for insurance, or we're like the Facebook for insurance, or we're like AirAsia for insurance, or whatever it is. I mean, there's no rules, hard set rules of what you can and can't choose, right? So we're like the Salesforce for insurance. There is no limits to what you can use. You just got to keep trying it and seeing what sticks, and then you start refining it. You start finding something that people get, and once people start getting it, then you start building on it, and it starts becoming something powerful. So that's the short form story, folks. Use them, don't abuse them.